Now, the note that I have been asked to present is the need to have a new tafsir. And we believe that having a new tafsir could, in fact, play a role towards fighting the extreme or extremist narrative from within Islam. Now, I must just make a point before I proceed. We are not asking for a new Qur'an. So we don't want any fatwa to be coming from you guys, because I don't want to lose my head. I'm not asking for a new Qur'an. What we are arguing is to have a new tafsir. A new tafsir. Not a new Qur'an, but a new tafsir. That's just to clear the point before we proceed. Now, in my note, I would like to touch three things. First, I would like to talk about al-ghulu, extremism. What does it mean? And I would like to briefly talk about the Quranic verses or some of the ayat that have been used by some of the extremists, or the most used verses in the Quran by the extremists. And I will be concluding my rather brief note, if it is going to be brief at all, by suggesting as to why there is a need to have a new tafsir. And first, the extremism within Islam is not a new phenomenon. If any one of us is familiar with the historiography of Islam, they can see that that's just before even 40 years or even 35 years after the death of Prophet Muhammad. And then you have the first fitna between Ali and Muawiyah that took place in the precisely Battle of Safin, where you would have a group of Muslims called the Kharijite or the Khawarij, those who decided, if you are to reduce the word Kharijite, mean kharaja, to get out or to come out. And those who were supporters of Ali, initially they supported Ali because they believed that Ali was on the haqq, i.e. on the right path, and they supported Ali against Muawiyah. But when Ali decided to go through an arbitration between the dispute between him and Muawiyah, and the Khawarij, or the group that supported him at the time, decided to get out. And hence the name or the terminology of Khawarij. These groups, or that group, went on to say that anyone who commits a sin without repenting is outside the fold of Islam. And the Khawarij were quite firm in their interpretation of the Qur'an, and they use a number of Quranic verses to substantiate their claim. That was the first group that is known within Islam to be very extreme and use the Qur'an in a way that was never done before. But the interesting thing about the Khawarij also was that the fact that they in fact did not fight against non-Muslims. They were fighting Muslims. That is a very interesting point to note with the Khawarij. And this is in itself like a contrast if you are to look at groups such as ISIL and the others. The Khawarij were not directing their fight against non-Muslims. they were directing it towards Muslims, not the opposite. Now, extremists has a very narrow and selective way of reading the Quran. They reduce the whole Quran into you are in and you are on the right, and those who are not in are on the wrong, not only here, but in the hereafter, so that they would be among the losers. And for that, they would use a host of Quranic verses. One of the really verses that they stop me if I'm not here. I'm doing fine with the time? Okay, good, very good. Is that 10 minutes for me or not 10 minutes? Oh, good. You know, there are few ayat that they use. وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَنْ يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ وَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ, for instance, is the verse that they use. Whoever seek any other religion except Islam, nothing will be accepted from him or her, and on the day of the judgment, he would be among the loser. Inna dinan and Allah Islam. The only religion in the sight of Allah or God is Islam. Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakum al-islamu dinan. And today, you know, I have chosen the right way and have taken Islam as the only valid religion for you, Muslim communities. And obviously, one can see the tafasir that have been made around, or the commentary about those verses. But these are the most used verses by the extremists. And you see, if you look at these verses, you can see if you are to take the word Islam, which they don't contemplate upon, and they reduce Islam to be only an Islam allazi ja'a bihi Muhammad, that the religion that Muhammad claimed to bring. And even Muhammad never claimed to have brought something new. In one hadith, I think, he is reported to have said that إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I have been appointed, I am not bringing anything new, but I came in to elevate, to expand what has already been brought. But also, even if you have to look, for instance, an ayah in Surah Yusuf, Yusuf, is reported to have said, Rabbi tawaffani musliman walhiqni minas salihin. Oh God, cause me die as a believer and make me enter among those who are righteous. But also you have also Ibrahim, millat abikum Ibrahim, huwa allazi sammakum muslimin awwal marra, for instance, that this is the religion of your forefathers, Ibrahim, who have called you or named you Muslim. So the word Islam itself is not, Muhammad never claimed to have brought it. That would be contradicting the word of the Qur'an itself if Muhammad was to say that, oh, I brought something new. No, he didn't. It was already in there. But obviously, there are changes. There are things that he renewed, there are things that he added, there are things that he put aside. But that's another debate. My concern is just to focus on the ayat, the verses that the extremists use in order to justify their actions. Now, moving forward, but also that you would see from those three verses that I told you that they would select Jews and Christians, and telling you that yes, Ahlul Kitab, they are the people of the book. I think that it has been referred in the Qur'an more than 35 times. Ahlul Kitab, people of the book, the Jews and the Christians. And even if you are more progressive in your tafsir, you would include the Hindus and the Jerusalemans and the others to be part of the people of the book. But they would take the two, Jews and Christians, saying that, you see here, and they put an ayah, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء بعضهم أولياء بعض ومن يتولهم فإنهم منهم. Or you who claim to be believers, do not take the Jews and the Christians as, they deliberately, they would not say allies, but friends. Because the Jews and Christians are friends to or allies to one another. And if you are to be one of them, if you are to help them, if you are to be friend, if you are to ally with them, you are one of them. So here it makes it stop that you cannot have anything to do with Jews, you can't do anything with Christians. And here again, they forgot completely about the relation that exists between Jews and Christians and Muslims in Spain, for instance, and even the fact that Muhammad married, for instance, one of his wife, Safiya, was Jewish. That in fact, Maria al-Qibti was a Christian. Maria would be the only woman after Khadija who bare a child for Muhammad. And others, they forget all that, they put it aside. But now, going to tafsir. And in the UK, the most dominant, have I had 10 minutes yet?
Yes, you have 10 minutes.
Oh, Jesus Christ, wow. That's so quick. That's really quick. I have to be very quick. Now going to the UK, in the UK, you look at the tafsir that is like in circulation, right? Proudly speaking, I mean, in Britain, it is like the Indian subcontinent. And the one that is really in circulation is the one by Mamadou, to a degree. You know, Tafhim al-Qur'an, towards understanding of Qur'an. And then you look at Maududi, the way that Maududi dealt with the tafsir. And first, initially it was in Urdu, it was drafted. It took him about, at least 15 years before he finished the tafsir. I know that he completed in 1972, that's before I was born, definitely. And then, wherever the ayah talk about the Christians, good practices, Maududi deliberately avoid to make any commentary. Wherever the ayah talks about the Christian being bad guys and and he goes on tafsir, and tafsir. When the ayah talks about Christian being good, he does what? He translates. When the ayah talks about Christian being really some of the ayat are quite hostile to the Christians and very, very also hostile to the Jews. But there is a context that he deliberately would not go into details. Right. And why we are saying that there is a need to have a new tafsir, not new Qur'an. Again, I don't know whether we are on Sky News or BBC. We are not asking for new Qur'an. We are asking for a new tafsir. And you look at all the tafasir, which is the plural of tafsir, that were done in the classical tafsir, they were all done without any exception. All of the tafasir, they were done during the golden age. You take Ibn Kathir, Az-Zamaskari, you take Al-Qurtubi, right, and others, they were all done. At-Tabari from Spain, they were all done. Yes, At-Tabari moved from Spain and went on to Egypt and Baghdad, but yet they were done in a time when Muslims were in power. Therefore, the interpretation that were made did not reflect that Muslims would be as minorities, nor did it take into consideration that Muslims would be living in a world that is so fast. It's reflected their own period. Hence, in my opinion, I think that there is a need to have a translation that is going to reflect the realities in which we lived in. And this, by the way, is not something new. It is not something new. Why? Because Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there isn't one single report that can state that he interpreted the whole Qur'an. He did not. Some verses that he explained and others he did not. Hence, that gives us, as Muslims, indeed non-Muslims also, to be able to bring our own intellect into it, to engage with the Qur'an. And for that, I believe that there is a need, for instance, to turn into Fazlur Rahman, for instance, who very eloquently spoke about the Qur'an, just pointing. Fazlur Rahman say Qur'an only points, but it is you as a human to go beyond. And that is very challenging. Yes, it doesn't tell you everything. You know, and the idea or the claim that Qur'an has everything, that is ridiculous. It contradicts the spirit of Qur'an itself. So then I think that taking Fazlur Rahman might help us towards having a new tafsir. The concept of al-harakatain, the double movement that Fazlur Rahman spoke about, i.e. I take the verse, read it, and then I try to go back to the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and see what was happening, and I come back. But I also have to add something. For a new tafsir that will be initiated by New Horizon, maybe, it has to go further, and it has to be brave. It has to add something unique. What is that? Is to be able to challenge the classical tafsir when those classical tafsir contradict the values of human rights. When those classical tafsir does not reflect or contradict the values of human rights, the right of women, the right of minorities, then there is no issue whatsoever to put those classical tafsir aside and go beyond where Qur'an pointed. Because those tafsir reflected the bi'ah, i.e. the milieu in which that those mufassirun lived in. So we as Muslims should be brave enough, and we have all the tools not to look at the East, but to look inwardly. And that tafsir can be done. Other than that, then we will only be ittiba'u tabaglid, as we, Ibn Khaldun once said, ittiba'u taqalid la ya'ni anna al-amwata ahya'un bal al-ahya'u amwatun. Blindly following the tradition and the customs of the dead people, it does not mean that the dead are alive, but those who are living are really dead. The word tafsir is an interpretation. In the science of tafsir, exegesis, you have two. You have tafsir bil ma'asur wa tafsir bil ra'i. You have an interpretation that is based on tradition, that is tafsir bil ma'asur, and you have an interpretation that is based on ra'i, which is tafsir bil ra'i, which is an interpretation that is based on reasoning. And now it is quite amazing that we are using Mawdudi's tafsir, that is a tafsir, a combination of two. That Mawdudi is a reflection of the crisis of partition that was taking place. That is, he cocktailed it with Ibn Kathir and Qurtubi, who were living, who did their tafsir, their interpretation when Islam was in the position of power. And you see the danger that you might be in if you are to use such tafsir when you are living in this environment right now. Maududi used his own reasons and combined it with traditions. And then I decided, forget the tradition, forget the reason. I'm only using Maududi's brain. When Maududi lived in a time that there was no iPod or iPhone, that can be quite dangerous. That is the reason why it is quite legitimate, and it is quite within Islam, that to be able to formulate a committee, and that's one of the points that I made in my article, that to have a committee of scholars from the West, Muslim scholars in the West, and not to seek any kind of help from the East. And having said that, we are not saying that there is nothing, Islam have nothing to do with the East. Islam was revealed in the Middle East. It will always be part of the Middle East. But we have to be able to reshape Islam. And Islam was reshaped when it went to India, when it went to China, when it went into Africa. And that's the reason why I said to Jack Straw 19 years ago, you have tried the chicken tikka masala Islam. You have tried, the biryani Islam. Why don't you try and have fish and chips Islam? An Islam that is purely a reflection of British Muslims, and where we know that the right of women is respected, the right of the minorities is respected, the right of people to be able to speak their mind is respected. Why don't we try that? And I think that this tafsir is definitely what this tafsir is trying to ask for. And I think that we can do it, because the fact that you are all here means that there are people who are willing to do something. And I'm really hoping that we would be able to achieve that. And it is to ask all the verses that are controversial or can have multiple interpretation, that to have a footnote explaining those verses and explaining the asbab and nuzul, the context in which those verses were revealed. Thank you.